front row. What a prospect for tomorrow night.
Yeah, you can thank your mate for that. Hard luck, PT.
Did you listen to Verstappen's radio at the end of qualifying? What seemed like simple frustration ended up being a real bombshell inside the Red Bull garage. And Max not only exploded at his engineer, but he also made a direct accusation at another driver, unleashing a silent war that now divides the paddock. Before continuing, let me know your opinion. Do you think Verstappen was right to point the finger at Lando Norris for what happened? Because what you're about to hear now completely changes the interpretation of qualifying in Singapore. Stay until the end, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. During the final minutes of qualifying for the Singapore Grand Prix, the tension could be felt even through the cameras. The humidity, the pressure of the night, and the dense air of the street circuit seemed to be pressing on each driver's head. Max Verstappen, accustomed to dominating decisive sessions, was facing a lap that could give him back pole position and demonstrate that Red Bull had regained its technical power. But what no one expected was the message that would completely shatter the calm. His longtime engineer, Giampiero Lambiase, said over the radio in a tone as dry as it was ironic, "You can thank your friend for that. Bad luck." In that instant, what had been an internal frustration transformed into an emotional bomb that exploded inside the car and was heard throughout the paddock. The phrase, beyond its content, carried a hidden message. Someone was directly responsible for Verstappen not completing the lap he was looking for. Verstappen had been pushing to the limit, with an RB21 that finally seemed to respond on one of the most demanding tracks on the calendar. The lap was fast, clean, and precise, but just as they approached the final chicane, the pace collapsed. The Dutchman aborted the lap and raised his hand in an angry gesture, pointing forward. He didn't need to say anything. His frustration was evident. In that second, television cameras captured his reaction, and the image of Verstappen gesturing angrily went viral before the session even ended. There was a story behind that hand in the air, a story that went deeper than simple traffic on track. Max knew someone had interfered with his ideal lap, and his reaction showed that the anger wasn't a product of the moment, but something deeper, something that had been building for weeks within the team. As the car slowly returned to the pits, the atmosphere inside Red Bull became tense and silent. Lambiase didn't speak again on the radio, and Verstappen remained subdued but visibly shaken. There was a mixture of disappointment and fury, because the RB21 had the pace to fight for pole, and everyone within the team knew it. That lap was the culmination of a weekend in which Red Bull had worked meticulously on the new aerodynamic updates, seeking to improve its performance on high-load circuits like Marina Bay. But all that technical effort was overshadowed by an incident that, in Max's eyes, had ruined his moment. What was supposed to be a confirmation of Red Bull's resurgence became a reminder that, in Formula One, perfection doesn't allow for even a second of error or poor synchronization with another car. As he stepped out of the car, Verstappen kept his gaze fixed, avoiding the cameras and microphones waiting for him at the paddock entrance. His body language spoke volumes. It wasn't simply the frustration of having lost a pole position, but the feeling of having been betrayed by circumstances. Inside the garage, engineers reviewed telemetry data, trying to find a technical explanation for the loss of performance in the final meters of the lap. But the images were clear. A car ahead, 2 seconds slower, had altered the airflow, reaching the RB21 right at the most sensitive point of the circuit. Verstappen knew it, Lambiase knew it, and the entire team understood it. The tension that had been brewing inside the car exploded once Verstappen got out of the car. In the mixed zone, surrounded by microphones and cameras, Max didn't need to think too hard to make it clear who he held responsible for what had happened. When a journalist asked him about the radio message, his response was as direct as it was filled with suppressed rage. "That's what happens when there's a car in front of you cruising 2 seconds ahead. That's a note, it will be remembered too." His words were a poison dart, and the tone with which he spoke them left no room for doubt. What had happened wasn't a simple setback, it was a personal offense. Verstappen wasn't speaking like the cold, calculating driver he usually is, but as someone who felt a crucial opportunity had been snatched away from him just when his team had managed to return a competitive car to him. The statement had an immediate impact. The journalist insisted on knowing exactly who he was referring to, and Max, without hesitation, clarified it with a brief but lapidary phrase. "It's not Oscar." With those 3 words, he removed any suspicions about Piastri and exposed the real culprit, Lando Norris. The message was clear and direct. The Briton, who had finished his lap and was returning to the pits, was singled out as the person responsible for obstructing the Red Bull's final lap. The most striking thing was the contrast between the two friends off the track, sharing laughter and mutual respect, now facing off in an incident that could leave its mark. Norris, according to the images, did not commit a regulatory violation, but his car, 2 seconds ahead of Verstappen, altered the RB21's downforce right at the critical moment. What was technically a legal situation emotionally became a provocation for the Dutch champion. Replays show the exact moment. Norris had completed his flying lap and was rolling towards the pits, but remained on the ideal trajectory just as Verstappen rocketed into the final chicane. With today's cars, aerodynamic turbulence is a determining factor. Even at more than 100 meters away, dirty air can upset the balance of the car behind. Jenson Button explained it perfectly during the broadcast. With these cars, even a car a couple of seconds behind can break your charge. It's not illegal, but it's enough to destroy a lap. That technical explanation served to contextualize what had happened, but it also confirmed Verstappen's frustration. He knew he couldn't blame the regulations, but he could blame his rival's sporting judgment. Inside the Red Bull garage, the atmosphere after qualifying was a mixture of silence and restraint. No one raised their voices, but everyone knew the atmosphere was tense. Engineers were scanning screens for technical answers, although the problem wasn't really with the data, but in their driver's head. Verstappen got out of the car with a hard face, and although he avoided any verbal outbursts, his gaze was enough to convey frustration. Lambiassi's phrase continued to echo in the air, "You can thank your friend for that," as a reminder that something had escaped the team's control right at the crucial moment. In a group as methodical and perfectionist as Red Bull, it's those small details that hurt the most, knowing that an entire weekend's work was undone by interference that wasn't in their hands. Verstappen's anger wasn't simply about losing pole, but about the way he lost it. The Dutchman knew he had the pace, knew the RB21 was finally responding, and that the car could give him a win at one of the toughest circuits on the calendar. Red Bull had spent weeks fine-tuning the new updates, especially the front wing with redesigned camber and the new engine cover that improved cooling in extreme conditions. That joint effort, which involved the technical department, track engineers, and Verstappen himself in every adjustment, was supposed to culminate in a perfect lap. But the incident with Norris destroyed everything in a matter of seconds. Max not only felt handicapped by traffic, but also powerless. He had the best Red Bull car in months, and he couldn't prove it. Helmut Marko, always keen to read emotions within the team, was one of the first to calmly intervene. In front of the cameras, he tried to calm tempers and put things into perspective. The car is better. It no longer jumps like a kangaroo. It takes the curves with confidence. It was his way of protecting the technical work and diverting the conversation away from the controversy. But privately, Marko knew that Max's frustration could have consequences if not handled well. Lambiassi, for his part, opted for absolute silence. His relationship with Verstappen has survived much more tense moments, but this episode exposed a rift. The radio communication, usually so well-tuned, this time sounded more like a cross-examination than a professional exchange. The consequences of the incident were not limited to the sporting arena, they extended to personal relationships and the emotional balance within the paddock. What began as a radio exchange ended up becoming a topic of conversation in every garage. Engineers from several teams agreed that the tension between Verstappen and Norris could alter the dynamics on track on Sunday. Both are young, talented, and ambitious, but their friendship off the track was tested for the first time. Verstappen felt directly harmed by someone he considered close, and that feeling of silent betrayal hit home. In the paddock, many commented that what had happened in Singapore was more than a technical incident. It was an emotional fracture between two of the most popular drivers on the grid. At Red Bull, the echo of the radio message continued to generate discomfort. Lambiassi and Verstappen had a private conversation after the session, away from the cameras, to calm things down. However, the phrase, "You can thank your friend for that," remained the symbol of collective frustration. The team had worked for weeks on a car that finally responded well to a circuit where they historically struggled, and they felt their efforts had been wasted by an unfortunate maneuver. That frustration translated into a tense atmosphere where every word had to be carefully measured. Marco, analyzing the situation, tried to minimize the controversy publicly, but internally understood that the incident could have a deeper psychological impact on his star driver. For his part, Lando Norris adopted a more restrained stance. He didn't want to enter into controversy or respond to Verstappen's direct accusations. McLaren simply explained that Lando had completed his lap and hadn't committed any rule violations. However, no one in the paddock doubted that the Briton was aware of what he had caused. Verstappen's gesture of raising his hand in the middle of the track was seen by everyone, and the scene sparked debate among the drivers themselves. Some defended Norris, arguing that the regulations don't require moving aside in that area, while others asserted that respect between competitors should go beyond the letter of the law. This difference of opinion reignited a debate that has raged in Formula One for years, when a maneuver is technically correct but ethically questionable. Ultimately, Verstappen's radio address wasn't simply an impulsive reaction or the tantrum of a frustrated champion. It was the raw expression of a buildup of tensions that had been brewing for weeks within Red Bull. What we heard that Saturday at Marina Bay was the voice of a driver who feels that all his efforts could be compromised by an external detail, by a minimal interference that makes the difference between glory and impotence. Behind that phrase that went viral, "You can thank your friend for that," lies a deeper subtext: the pressure to prove that Red Bull is still a dominant team, the internal struggle to remain calm in an environment where every tenth of a second defines races and reputations. Verstappen knows that to make up ground in the championship, he'll need more than speed. He'll need balance, self-control, and the ability to transform anger into motivation. And if he succeeds, the story could take an unexpected turn. Singapore might be remembered not as the end of an opportunity, but as the point where a champion's comeback began. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Was Verstappen's reaction fair, or did he just let the pressure get the better of him? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.